Ruby Franke, once a seemingly wholesome YouTube parenting guru, behind the channel 8 Passengers, presented the image of a large, loving family navigating the challenges of raising children with strict, responsible parenting techniques. Millions tuned in for her advice, but behind the curated facade, a disturbing reality was unfolding. Allegations of severe child abuse and neglect surfaced, painting a picture of a home environment far removed from the idyllic one that was presented online. Franke now faces serious legal repercussions, and the case has ignited a fierce debate about the ethics of family vlogging, the potential for exploitation of children online, and the fine line between discipline and abuse. This story is a dark reminder that what we see online is not always the truth, and a stark warning about the potential dangers of seeking fame and influence at the expense of your own children. I'm Reagan Snyder, and this is the story of Ruby Franke. Ruby Griffiths was raised alongside her 3 sisters, Ellie, Bonnie, and Julie, and her brother Beau, by very religious parents. They were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and their religious lifestyle and beliefs would stick with them into adulthood. When Ruby was 18, she started college at Utah State University, and that's where she met Kevin Franke, who was a college senior, at their apartment complex during a meet and greet type get-together. Within 2 weeks, they were engaged, and shortly after, they got married. They settled into their life in Springville, Utah, and it didn't take long for Kevin and Ruby to start a family. It was always Ruby's dream to be a stay-at-home mom, and in 2003, their eldest daughter, Sherry, was born. Both Kevin and Ruby leaned into their traditional gender roles, with Kevin working as a professor for BYU and Ruby as a stay-at-home mom. They went on to have 5 more kids, all within about 2 years of each other. After Sherry came Chad, and then Abby, Julie, Russell, and then finally Eve. Ruby's sisters all had YouTube channels, and Ruby wanted to get in on that action. So in 2015, she started her own channel and called it 8 Passengers, representing each member of her family. She would upload a video every single day documenting her and Kevin's life with their 6 kids. By 2020, she found a lot of success. She had an impressive following of around 2.5 million subscribers. The videos showed a lot of intimate moments of the kids coming of age, like one of their daughters shaving her legs for the first time. While this was controversial in its own right, viewers started to become a little bit suspicious of Ruby's tough love parenting style. Documented in some of her videos were some alarming things. In one video, Ruby talks about how she got a message from Eve's teacher asking her to bring a lunch to school for Eve. Ruby tells the teacher that Eve, who's 6, is in charge of packing her lunch, and so the natural consequence is that she'll have to go without lunch today. She even expresses that she hopes no one steps in and feeds her. In another video, Eve is punished for asking which movie they're seeing after Ruby tells her that they're going to go see a movie. After being unable to find a babysitter to come stay with Eve so that the rest of them could still go to the movies, she made Eve apologize and made a whole big deal about it. In another video, she threatened to take scissors and cut one of the kids' Stuffy's heads off as punishment for something. In another, she takes Christmas away from the 2 youngest kids for, quote, long patterns of selfishness, and instead she was going to give them the gift of love and boundaries and repentance. She often withheld food and used it as punishment, and as time went on, people began to notice that Chad wasn't in any of the recent videos that they'd been posting, and so fans of the channel started to question this, and Ruby and Kevin uploaded a video to address the speculation. Chad was sent away to a wilderness camp called Anasazi Foundational Wilderness Therapy Program for about 10 weeks. Wilderness programs are an aggressive approach meant to address behavioral issues through physically challenging activities, and these are just the things she was willing to let people see. No one knew how bad it really was for these kids off camera. One particular video convinced lots of viewers that the Franke family needed to be investigated by CPS. It came out in this video that Chad had been sleeping on a beanbag for the last 7 months. His room had been taken away for playing a prank on his brother. In 2020, a petition was started on change.org to get Ruby under investigation for child abuse, which garnered over 18,000 signatures. CPS did check into the Franke family. In fact, they had checked into them multiple times over the past few years, but nothing ever came of it. Ruby ultimately responded to people's speculation that there was abuse in the Franke household and basically just said that what they were seeing was taken out of context. But the damage had already been done, and the 8 Passengers channel's popularity declined in 2021. In early 2022, Ruby decided to redirect her focus. She shut down her YouTube account and began working with Jody Hildebrandt. Jody became a licensed mental health counselor in 2007, focusing on porn and sex addiction. She was also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and she had a great reputation. She was widely regarded as wise and good at what she did. Because of this, a lot of Utah bishops would refer their ward members who were seeking help to Jody. In 2012, she started Connections, an internet-based program meant to address destructive behaviors and addictions. But she ran into some trouble in 2013. A man named Adam Steed, who was also LDS, had been utilizing Jody's services to work on his marriage and other personal issues. Jody violated patient confidentiality by speaking about him to his bishop and BYU, where he attended. This led to Adam's excommunication from the church, expulsion from BYU, and the end of his marriage. She had so egregiously damaged Adam's life and reputation that he chose to take action against her. This resulted in her license being put on probation for 18 months. After these 18 months were up, Jody resumed business as usual, and eventually Ruby would put Chad into therapy with her. At some point, Ruby felt that her marriage could use some help, and so Jody began to counsel Ruby and Kevin. This is where the real trouble for Ruby started. Jody sunk her claws into Ruby, and Ruby followed Jody's counsel. It was almost cult-like. Jody was so manipulative that in 2022, she convinced Ruby that it would be a good idea for her to move in with the Franke family. Kevin wasn't so sure about it, but he was willing to do whatever it took to save his marriage to Ruby, and he eventually gave in. After Jody moved in with the Frankes, she convinced Ruby that she needed to separate from Kevin. But it wouldn't be a normal separation. Kevin was allowed to stay in the house, but there would be rules. He was not allowed upstairs, where Jody stayed, and he could only go into the kitchen with Ruby's permission, and they only communicated through Jody. Ruby's sisters were so weirded out by the things that Ruby was telling them about Jody's teaching and counsel that they asked her to just not talk about it. But ultimately, Ruby cut off contact from them, and they didn't have any access to her or the Franke kids. Kevin would later go on to say during a police interview that Connections classrooms were a bunch of, quote, man-hating women looking to tear down their husbands. Also during this interview, Kevin claimed that weird stuff started to happen after Jody moved in. There would be plates that flew across the room by themselves and break against the wall, and Jody told them that she was haunted by shadow figures. Kevin became what he called the resident exorcist, and he would have to give blessings to Jody whenever she went into her nightly trances. Eventually, Jody and Ruby began to share a bed, and they started having spiritual visions together. Things continued to get weirder and worse, and Ruby told Kevin that if they were going to repair their marriage, he was going to have to move out of the house. And so he did. Jody brought Ruby onto her Connections team as a certified mental fitness trainer. They started an Instagram account together called Moms of Truth, where they spoke about parenting and truth versus distortion. During this time, Ruby claimed that she stopped her YouTube channel to save her kids. The timeline's unclear, but Jody must have moved back into her house at some point because Ruby would leave her kids at home alone while she went 4 hours south to visit Jody at her house in Ivins, Utah. By 2023, Sherry was a college student and living away from home at this point, and Chad had also moved out of the family home. But 4 of the Franke children were still minors, with the youngest being 9. Sherry got word from a neighbor that the 2 middle kids, who were teenagers, were home alone, and their mom had been gone for a while. Sherry called the authorities to report this and ask for a wellness check. When the police showed up, they knocked on the door, but they got no answer. When they looked through the windows, they saw that the kids were home, but instead of answering the door, they just ran upstairs. At this point, there was nothing police could really do without a search warrant. Meanwhile, Ruby was down in Ivins with her 2 youngest kids, Russell, who was 12, and Eve, who was 9, living with Jody. Kevin, who had been out of the house and completely out of contact with his kids for the last year, didn't know what was going on. On August 30th, 2023, 911 dispatchers received a call from a man claiming that a 12-year-old boy showed up to his house looking emaciated and wounded.
911, the address of your emergency. Okay, and the phone number you're calling from. Tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, and he's thirsty.
Okay. Is your door locked?
No, I'm sitting outside with him on the front patio.
Okay, cool.
And he asked us to call the police.
What's
So
his
he's
name?
very afraid.
Okay, and are the neighbors out of their home, or is anybody looking for them that you can see?
No. Our homes are far enough away. I'm not sure. How did you get out of the house? He says you just left through the porch at the neighbor's house. Her name is Jody Hildebrand, and she lives 2 doors up the street. Yeah, out here in Cayenne, the houses are far apart, so he walked just under the block to get to our house. He rang my doorbell and asked me to call the police. But he's very thirsty and...
Need an ambulance?
I don't think he needs an ambulance. I'll let the cops decide that, but his ankles are taped up and he won't tell us why.
Okay.
But he has duct taped around each ankle. Yeah, there's sores around them. I think there's a good chance he's been... Oh, and he has been around his ankles. I mean, his wrists as well. Okay, this boy has been... He needs... This kid has obviously been... I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
Okay. Let's get the paramedics headed over that way, okay?
Oh, that's a good idea, too.
Let's see. Has he told you where his mom or dad are?
Haven't asked him that. Do you know where your mom and dad are? No, he doesn't see them. He says he knows where his mom is, but...
He doesn't know where his dad is?
That's correct. He just says he doesn't live around here. And is your mom around here? Have you seen her lately? He doesn't know where she is right now.
Does he know his mom's name?
What's your mom's name? Ruby Franke? Ruby Franke is his mom's name.
Okay. And does she live in the area?
No, I'm not sure where she lives.
Can you ask him if any other children were in the home he came from?
Was there any other kids up at Jody's house? Anybody else?
Are they tied up as well?
What's the deal with? Are they being held? Do they have wounds on them as well? So they're able to walk around the house and everything. Okay. He says everything's fine with them. He says what's happened to him is his fault.
They're coming to you as quick as they can. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Really well. I just want to make sure.
He's fine. I've got him sitting here. My wife, he got him water and giving him something to eat because he's hungry, and I think the young man, he's hearing his stocking feet, so he escaped.
They should just be pulling up now. Let me know when they're with you, okay?
Will do. I hear a car, but they're not coming on the driveway. You did good. Enjoy that banana, okay?
Yeah, he
You
just
did the
turned
right
a few
thing.
seconds ago, so.
Is Jody up there right now? Jody Hildebrand is up there right now. So she may come looking for him here soon. We need the cops here as soon as possible. She's a bad lady. We didn't realize how bad.
I'm just asking where he is.
If we have to take him inside the house, we will. We're just sitting outside right now because we have chairs out here and it was convenient.
That's okay. If anything, he's sitting out down your driveway and keeping an eye on the house. So if that's where you feel safe, that's where the child feels safe, and let's just stay where you're at.
Yeah,
You're
I
on
think
the
we're doing this.
Does he have anything with him?
But no, he's wearing a long sleeve shirt and shorts, and it's way too big for him. The ambulance is here.
I'll go ahead and I'll let you go then. You did a great job.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
The boy was Russell Franke, and he had just escaped from Jody Hildebrand's house. He was skin and bones, and around his wrists and ankles were some deep cuts that had been covered in a cayenne pepper and honey mixture and then covered with saran wrap. Police showed up to Jody's house immediately, and upon searching the house, they found Eve in a closet, hungry and emaciated. Initially, she wouldn't go with police or even talk, so an officer sat in there with her for a couple hours. They fed her pizza, and eventually she came out. The torture these kids had been subjected to finally came to light. They were forced to stand in the desert sun in the middle of the summer until their skin burned and blistered and sloughed. They were forced to work outside in the heat with no shoes. Ruby and Jody restricted food and water from them. They were punished for sneaking a drink of water from a garden hose. They were made to carry boxes up and down the stairs for hours at a time. They were isolated from everyone, including each other. They were in the same house, yet they hadn't seen each other for a month. Ruby dumped old mop water on one of them. She bragged to them that she slept in a soft bed while they slept on the concrete basement floor. They were given no form of entertainment, no books, no coloring, no TV, nothing. Ruby had put boots on specifically to kick Russell. They were forced to do wall sits for long periods of time. They were pushed in the pool. Ruby shaved Eve's hair off. She would poke them with a cactus, and this was all in the name of love. They were told that this abuse was necessary because they were evil and possessed, and these were acts of love. At one point, Russell did escape, but Ruby and Jody found him and brought him back to the house, and this time they tethered him to Ruby so he couldn't go anywhere. When police showed up at Jody's house, she was immediately taken into custody and the house was searched. Russell was taken to the hospital, and eventually when they were able to get Eve out of the closet, she was also taken to the hospital where Russell was. They were in such bad shape when they were found that they probably wouldn't have lasted much longer if Russell hadn't gotten away, and luckily both of the kids would make full recoveries. During all of this, Ruby had called her friend Pam Botcher and asked her to take the two middle kids, Abby and Julie, who were teenagers at this point and staying home alone, over to her house because there was a family emergency. Pam was a longtime friend of Jody's, and she was the president of Connections. Police went back to the Franke's house in Springville, and they had to force entry, but they didn't find anybody there. They ended up tracking Abby and Julie down at the Botcher's home in American Fork, Utah. Abby and Julie were given the option to go into state custody or to go with their older sister Sherry. And obviously, of course, they chose to go with Sherry. Ruby was brought in for questioning at the police station, but she said absolutely nothing besides stating that she wanted a lawyer. The rest of the time, she just stared at them blankly. When Ruby and Jody were placed under arrest, Sherry uploaded a photo to her social media of the arrest with the caption just saying, "Finally." This abuse had been going on for a long time, and it only got worse after Ruby buddied up with Jody. And now poor Sherry has been put into a situation that no kid should have to be put in. She is having to step up as the oldest Franke kid to help her siblings. When police searched Jody's house, they found a journal that Ruby kept outlining all the abuse that the kids were subjected to while they were at Jody's house. Ruby saw it as a training program designed to remove the evil because Russell and Eve were, quote, spawns of Satan. But that wasn't the only documentation of what was going on. During his interrogation, Kevin mentioned something called the pen papers. Jody had given Ruby this leather portfolio where she and Ruby kept their documented revelations and visions. They believed that God would eventually decree them as Holy Scripture and that nobody was to see them until then. Kevin said that in one of Ruby's visions, she was walking alone with Jesus and he challenged her to walk on water. She would also go back and forth between talking as herself and talking in different voices like she was possessed. Ruby would end up taking a plea deal. The conditions of the plea deal were that her sentences would be served consecutively and she would testify against Jody. Jody was also given a plea deal, and on February 20th, 2024, Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt were sentenced to 1 to 15 years for each of the 4 counts of child abuse that they pled guilty to, with a maximum sentence of 30 years. People are mad at Ruby, but it seems that the public consensus is that Jody is more at fault here and she should rot in prison for the rest of her life. One big question on people's minds is, where was Kevin in all of this? People are divided. Kevin's lawyer, Randy Kester, believes that Kevin is a good guy and a good dad. Kevin hadn't seen his children for about a year before the abuse came to light. In his mind, he was just doing what he had to do to get his marriage back on track. However, it seems that his relationship with his kids is strained, especially his relationship with Sherry. Sherry had gone into the Franke home in Springfield to get some clothing and personal items for her sisters, and Kevin wanted to file charges against her for it. Another question that Ruby's actions pose is, why? Why did she do this? People tend to think that she was brainwashed. This is a mom who was unapologetic in her tough parenting lifestyle, yet she took Jody's words as gospel. This sort of thing happens all the time, unfortunately. If you're into true crime, I'm sure you've heard plenty of stories similar to this in terms of one person leading and another person or people following. It's very, very cult-like. This isn't the first time that Jody has abused someone either. Her niece Jordan came out and spoke about all the awful abuse they endured at the hands of Jody while growing up. Kevin filed for divorce from Ruby on November 29th, 2023. Sherry, the oldest, has plans to pursue a doctorate in the political field and hopes to work in D.C. one day. Chad is pretty active on Instagram and he posts about himself and his girlfriend often. From what I've found, the younger 4 Franke children are still in state custody. Kevin continues to fight for custody of his children, and he's pushing for regulations in the life coaching industry. Jody Hildebrandt's house was put up for sale, and initially it was listed for $5.3 million, but it was pulled off the market until her sentencing was complete. As of telling this story, it's listed on Zillow for just under $5 million. It comes with 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a pool, and everlasting nightmare memories of child abuse. Thank you for your support. If you liked this episode, please consider sharing this podcast and leaving a 5-star review because it really does help. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.